toward one, the perfection of love, harmony and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the spirits of guidance. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 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 Yes, dear friends, welcome to this continuation of our studies of the Gatha papers. We are now in the series on Pasi Anfas, which is to say, the observation of the breath. And we've come to this lesson. Color and sound. Breath in reality is light, but when it shoots forth its rays, according to the direction of the rays and the capacity which takes this light, the colors manifest. Form and color both depend upon the direction the light takes and upon the degree of light. Nothing on earth is meaningless. Every occurrence has its meaning, and every moment has its purpose. Even the colors that manifest in the light of the breath have their meaning, which coincides with the moment and the conditions then. There are attempts being made to take photographs of thoughts and feelings, and some have even attempted to photograph the spirits. It is difficult to say how far this attempt can be successful. No doubt it gives a great scope to falsehood. If there is any means of seeing a spirit, a form from the inner world, it is only breath. That in the light of breath a form from the inner world can manifest as a picture from the magic lantern. The picture actually is in the lantern, and it is the reflection of that picture which we see. Those who can see the form of the dead see the reflection before them manifested in the light of their own breath, the real form being still in the inner world. For it is the breath which connects the inner world with the outer world, just as the light thrown from the magic lantern falls upon the curtain. There are many who believe that there is a color or a note which belongs to a particular person. And this question gives no doubt a great scope for confusion and puzzle. Many people are anxious to know what note really belongs to them or what color is their special color. In point of fact, this question can be looked at from two different points of view. One symbolical and the other metaphysical. From the symbolical point of view, every person is, so to speak, tuned to a certain pitch in that person's particular evolution. And that person stands with another person, just as C on the piano may stand with G or E or A. This shows the reason why a person can get on with a certain person harmoniously and with another inharmoniously. It is not the fault of the G or the F on the piano that they sound inharmonious together. It is the combination which causes inharmony. It is not always the note which is inharmonious. It is a wrong combination which makes it so. Spiritual perfection makes one the keynote in which is harmony with all notes. And even that perfection shown in the world by Christ, caused his crucifixion. Metaphysically, this question can be explained that there is a certain degree of life in a person which can be distinguished by that person's breath. And that degree shows itself to the seer in color and sound. Those who have not reached the degree of that power which perceives the tone and color of breath can perceive it by the voice and expression of the person. There's so much in these few paragraphs. Murshid begins by saying how breath is light itself. And of course, Murshid is speaking here not of breath as the substance of the air we breathe, but breath as the life field itself. And says that this is luminous, and that is the light that functions in all of our senses. And the same light, when passing from the unmanifest state into the manifest state, more and more takes on the conditions of manifestation, and according to the angle of its passage and the conditions through which it passes, it takes on certain characteristics. And so, color and sound arise from the primal energy. And the variation of colors and sounds bespeaks the diversity of conditions as light passes into the physical plane and ultimately materializes this manifest universe. But if one would step back from the surface, as it were, of this universe, one would more and more perceive this same universe dissolved into frequencies, into tones, into vibrations. And that's why in meditation, when you turn your senses inward, first you continue to see the impressions of what you have seen with open eyes, the faces of people you've met, or the scenes in the streets. Those impressions show themselves, but if you rise higher, then the forms dissolve, but still there is color and there is vibration. Now, if one would go higher still, one would move beyond the variation of tones and experience a perfect silence and perfect stillness. But to reach that silence, there's an interval between form and formlessness, and that interval is experienced through color and sound. Now Murshid speaks about the internal sensations as ones that the scientists of his day were interested in recording, and that endeavor indeed continues, and progress is being made to the point where it may not be surprising if one day soon our dreams at night are video recorded. The science is almost there. So there has always been and continues to be an interest in the, as it were, quantifying of inner phenomena. But Murshid says that ultimately there will always be a dimension to this inner phenomenon that can't be quantified, it can't be objectively, materially grasped, and instead it's better attended to directly, not through a representation, but through presence, immediate presence through the breath. And that is how one can most immediately and most authentically experience the inner life of each moment. So, going on to speak of how each person has tendencies of consciousness which promote certain colors, that to a certain extent we can say that a person has a particular color, or maybe a palette of colors, a range of colors. And one might become very curious about that. And so Murshid is suggesting a certain caution, because if one becomes overly preoccupied with phenomena, one will fail to address what is essential, which is the act of sheer witnessing, of presence on the breath, which actually brings to light all of these phenomena. But if one is interested in the phenomena themselves, and one is speculating and constantly puzzling over them, then one might fool oneself into coming to all kinds of conclusions. But those conclusions are very different from the experience of direct witnessing, which comes through stilling the mind and watching the breath and being aware. But Murshid does recognize that different personalities have different tones and notes and colors connected with them. Certain tones predominate in certain kinds of people, and this helps to explain why certain people don't get along. It's just because those two notes don't necessarily match very well. The same person might easily harmonize with someone else much better. And yet, it's possible for every human being to more and more become universal, and to be able to harmonize with people of all kinds, and as it were, to be capable of all colors. But then Murshid goes on to say, but even in those great beings, such as Christ, who attained perfection, even there, the nature of the world is such that inharmony will always have its say. And finally, Murshid concludes in saying that in the same way that someone who has keen outer senses, in encountering a person, can apprehend the state of that person by their expression, the expression in their eyes, the expression of their mouth, their gestures, and so forth. Someone who is attentive can see into that being and their state by noticing that. Someone whose inner senses are very well developed can sense the state even without access to the outer features, just by feeling the breath of that person. That the breath of the person will tell the meditator everything that is to be known. Let's have one more lesson from the Gathas. The breath is like a swing which has a constant motion, and whatever is put in the swing swings also with the movement of the breath. Fikr, therefore, is not a breathing practice. In fikr, it is not necessary that one should breathe in a certain way, different from one's usual breathing. Fikr is to become conscious of the natural movement of the breath, and picturing breath as a swing, to put in that swing a certain thought, as a babe in the cradle, to rock it. The only difference in rocking, the difference is rocking is an intentional activity on the part of the person who rocks the cradle. In fikr, no effort must be made to change the rhythm of the breath. The breath must be left to its own usual rhythm. One need not try even to regulate the rhythm of the breath, for the whole mechanism of one's body is already working rhythmically. So the breath is rhythmical by nature, and it is the very breath itself which causes one to distinguish rhythm. What is important in fikr is not the rhythm, but the concentration. Fikr is swinging the concentrated thought with the movement of the breath, for breath is life, and it gives life to the thought which is repeated with the breath. On the rhythm of the breath, the circulation of the blood and the pulsation of the heart and head depend, which means that the whole mechanism of the body, also of the mind, is directed by the rhythm of the breath. When a thought is attached to the breath by concentration, then the effect of that thought reaches every atom of one's mind and body. Plainly speaking, the thought held in fikr runs with the circulation of the blood through every vein and tube of the body, and the influence of that thought is spread through every faculty of the mind. Therefore, the reaction of the fikr is the resonance of the same thought expressing itself through one's thought, speech, and action. So in time, the thought one holds in fikr becomes the reality of oneself. So one who contemplates on God, in time arrives at a state where that one's own self turns into the being of God. Now, shall we put into practice what Murshid has described here? First of all, sitting comfortably but upright. 2 feet firmly planted on the ground, shoulders open, chest open, tailbone tethered to the center of the earth, and the crown open to the vast sky above. Without directing the breath, without controlling it, just watch it, watch the inhalation come in and the exhalation go out. turn our attention to the heart in the left breast. And visualize a ruby red glow. And turn to the other side of the chest, opposite the heart, and visualize a white light. Let your attention now swing back and forth across the chest like a pendulum. Inhaling Allah from the left to the right as the white light increases. Then exhaling Hu to the left as the red light radiates, and continue. relax and sense your state. One more fikr on the swing of the breath. It's been raining here in Richmond. Reminding us of that downpour that is called the Rama, the mercy and compassion of the Creator, which continuously pours down upon the earth. Sometimes we are aware of it, sometimes we are unaware, but in this fikr we make ourselves aware. So, inhaling, let the thought be, send the shower of thy mercy and compassion. Silently, internally say these words as you inhale. Send the shower of thy mercy and compassion, and exhaling, on humanity. Send the shower of thy mercy and compassion on humanity. And then we can once again relax. Feel the ground under your feet. And when you're ready, open your eyes. And it's almost the end of the day. These winter days are short, which means it's almost the beginning of the Urs of Hazrat Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, which is a very special day because Maulana Rumi is a teacher whose light continues to shine in this world and guide many, many souls in their journey. So this is a day to remember his light, his guidance with gratitude and reverence. What a generous soul, what a magnanimous soul that brought so much beauty into this world, beauty that still isn't exhausted and will never be exhausted because the Masnavi that he has brought into this world is an inexhaustible treasure. Murshid called it a scripture. And in this he echoed the words of Mola Jami, who said of Rumi, he may not have been a prophet, but he had a book. The book of the Masnavi is a book of profound spiritual guidance, a book in which the divine guidance can be found. And certainly it was a book in which Murshid was immersed, and Pir Zia Shahida Nur herself was drawn to it and even retold one of the tales of the Masnavi, and that is the story of the mouse and the camel. So that's a story about a mouse that was walking along one day and noticed that a camel driver had left a camel alone, and its reins were just dragging on the ground. The camel wasn't tied to anything. There was no one riding it, and the mouse suddenly had an idea. How easy it would be for me just to snatch those reins and make off with the camel. So, on a whim, that's exactly what the mouse did. And just to humor the mouse, the camel went along with it. And you can just imagine the pride of this little mouse as he guided the camel along through the dunes. He was king of the world. But suddenly, there appeared before the mouse and the camel a river, a barrier. Now what? And the mouse balked. He couldn't go further. The camel said, "Go on, go ahead." And the mouse said, "I can't. I'm too small." The camel said, "Watch me." Stepped into the river and easily was making his way, and turned back to the mouse and said, "Just look now. Can you see that the partnership of you and I is an unequal one?" And the mouse repented. The mouse had imagined himself the great master of the camel, but actually his own abilities were much less than he had imagined. But the camel was kindly, he said, "Jump on my back and I'll take you across." And so the mouse was conveyed across the river and jumped off again and found some mice and lived happily ever after. Of course, we can see in this story a lesson about hubris. about the notion that we have all the answers, we're in charge, we know best. It's this little self, this egoic part of the mind that becomes euphoric when it has a bit of power. But how fleeting that power is in the great scheme of things. And perhaps the camel could be interpreted as the soul. So the little mind tries to drive the soul and to lead it on its way, but it's really the soul that has a greater wherewithal. And if the mind rides the soul, it will be better for everyone. So that's the story of the mouse and the camel. And then there are the stories that Murshid told from the Masnavi. These stories revolve around the world. Some of the stories in the Masnavi came originally from India, from sources like the Panchatantra and the stories of Somadeva, and made their way into the Masnavi and then back again to India. So these stories are really the lore of the world, the wisdom lore of this world circulates in folk tales and fairy stories and animal fables. Maulana Rumi was so deeply attuned to this, as was Pir Zia Inayat as a storyteller. In that way she continued the tradition of Maulana Rumi, the spiritual story as a source of guidance. So one more story from the Masnavi, and this is one that Murshid tells, and that's the story of the parrot. There was a merchant that had a pet parrot and loved the parrot and treated the parrot very well, but the parrot was always homesick for India. And one day, the merchant told the parrot that he was going to travel to India and wanted to know if the parrot had any errand for him while he was there. And she answered, "Yes, please do go and visit my brothers and sisters in the jungle and give them this message that I am sad because I am not free. What guidance can you give me?" And the merchant said, "All right, I'll take the message." And he went to India and he saw the parrots and he related what his pet parrot had told him. And one of the parrots in the tree, hearing this, suddenly fell off the branch, fell onto the ground as though dead. And the merchant was deeply disturbed, and at last returned home and told the parrot, "What a foolish message you've given me. It's caused the death of a bird," and related what had happened. Now the parrot heard this and now suddenly fell down dead. And now the merchant thought, how foolish I've been to relate the story, which has now caused so much death. And so he took his beloved parrot out of her cage, outside, for burial. And suddenly she flew up into the sky, perfectly alive, and looking down, smiled, and let him know that freedom is what we all desire. And how did she attain her freedom? She was taught by a murshid in India. That murshid had preached not in words but in action, and she imitated that action. And what was the action? Fana. Die before you die. Pass away. That is to say, be in this world as though you have already left this world or not yet come into this world. Be in this world in that state of being which transcends the narrow confines of this narrow passage. Be in this world like the corpse in the hands of the washer of the dead. Be like this, and you will find freedom. What an amazing story. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi was Wali Allah, friend of God, and his memory and his words will always elevate the one who reflects upon them. And so on the occasion of his coming Urs, let us invoke the silsila that leads from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to Hazrat Sheikh Jalaluddin Rumi, and onward to Hazrat Inayat Khan and Pir Vilayat, Pir Zia Inayat. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hazrat Sayyid al-Kaunain Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Hazrat Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali Murtaza karamallah wajhu, Hazrat Sheikh Hassan Basri radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Abdul Wahid bin Zaid radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Abu Yaqub Susi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Abu Yaqub Nahri radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Abu Usman Makki radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Abu Yaqub Basri radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Abul Qasim Ramdan radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Abul Abbas Idris radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Dawood bin Muhammad Maruf radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Muhammad bin Ankil radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Abul Hassan Ismail Qasri radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Raziuddin Ali Lala bin Sayyid radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Abu Raza Ratan radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Shamsuddin Tabrizi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Jalaluddin Rumi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Nizamuddin Gori radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Zainuddin Tuqi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Sadruddin Ayub Tusi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Nuruddin Tusi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Abdullah Qutbi Alam radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Qazi Ilmuddin Satbi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Qazi Qazam radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Mahmud Rajan radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Jamaluddin Jamman radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Hassan Muhammad radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Muhammad Chishti radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Yahya Madani radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Shah Kalimallah Jahanabadi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Nizamuddin Aurangabadi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Maulana Fakhruddin Dilvi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Ghulam Qutbuddin radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Nasiruddin Mahmud Urf Kalimia radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Sayyid Muhammad Hassan Jili Kalimi radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Sayyid Muhammad Abu Hashim Madani radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Pir Murshid Inayat Khan radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Pir Zia Shahida Noor Anisa radiyallahu an, Hazrat Sheikh Vilayat Inayat Khan radiyallahu anh. We pray. Amen. And do keep in mind also that Tuesday is the Urs of Hazrat Shaykh Ghaus al-Azam, Abdul Qadir Jilani. Now we come to the rule for today, and these are the words, the chivalrous rule, the silver rule. My conscientious self, do not challenge anyone who is not your equal. My conscientious self, do not challenge anyone who is not your equal. The rules inspire in us courage. What an important quality to realize in one's life. Courage, moral fiber, the valor, the gallantry, the determination to serve justice in all situations, even at the cost of one's own interests. That's courage, standing for what is right. Now, what is contrary to courage is to vent one's disquietude, one's restlessness, one's agitation, one's aggression, to vent it on those who are at a disadvantage, those whom one has in one's power, to mistreat those that lack power in a situation. It is uncourageous to be obsequious and flattering and deferential toward the ones that have power, while abusing those who are powerless. That's the very picture of cowardice and injustice. So what is the opposite of this? What is courage? Courage means stand up to those who have power if justice is at stake, even if it means that one will face repercussions. Stand up for justice in opposition to the tyranny of those who tyrannize. And even if one is in a weaker position, stand up to the injustice. But amongst those who are underprivileged, or those who lack power, lack status, on the contrary, not to challenge them, not to intimidate them or in any way prevail upon them, but instead to be of service, to be of assistance, to level the playing field, to serve the maligned, the mistreated, the ones who are oppressed, and stand boldly up to oppression. So we are encouraged to refuse to become a cog in the machine of human evil. evil becomes banal. It becomes a machine that spins its wheels and crushes people within them. And it's too easy to get caught up in the mechanics of it. At Nuremberg, the Nazis who had presided over the torture and genocide of thousands of innocents gave the excuse that they were just following orders. That's the banality of evil. Just following orders, doing what the powers required. But what orders were they following? Not the order of God, not the command of loving kindness, not the imperative of compassion or the rule of justice, but the commands of the devil. To follow such a command is to be chained, is to be bound in chains that lead to dark places. Where there is another chain, a chain of light, a silsila of light that leads up to heaven. And that is the cord of the ideal. That is service to the truth, service to the generous. Even if it means defying unjust commands, rather than to persecute the weak, the oppressed, the confined and powerless. Serve the powerless. Serve the helpless. Do not become a cog in the machine of oppression. So by all means, challenge abusive authority, but do not challenge the dispossessed. Do not challenge and persecute the helpless. The words are these: my conscientious self, do not challenge anyone who is not your equal. When there is no equal footing, when there is no level playing field, when you find yourself in a position of power, honor the responsibility. With power comes with responsibility. And this rule is reminding us of that obligation. So I'll say the words once more, and if you're ready to affirm it all together, we can do so as we close our eyes. My conscientious self, do not challenge anyone who is not your equal. My conscientious self, do not challenge anyone who is not your equal. Yes, friends, now we've come to the conclusion of the first part of this gathering, and we say goodbye to our friends elsewhere and convene now for tea and sohbet. नीचे बैठो मैं